Hello and welcome to the Reiki Women Podcast. My name is Carrie with the Reiki Healing Society, and today my beautiful colleagues are joining with me today to talk about a really beautiful topic. So before I introduce the topic, I'd love to introduce my colleagues. So we got Michaela Daystar with Heartscapes Reiki, and we have Bronwen Logan from Reiki with Bronwen. And so the topic we wanted to discuss today is how we can heal the world and various methods to help the world heal. And, Reiki is quite, interpersonal in the sense that as we make changes in our own life, in our own heart, in our own inner state, in our own well-being, that change makes ripples out into the world. And I believe that if you are a Reiki practitioner or a healing arts practitioner or just somebody who has it in their heart that they want to help the world heal, that some of that is that we transform ourselves through our spiritual practice, and that work in turn creates change in the world. But it's kind of a unique anomaly, right? Because we know in healing is that you can't really heal anybody else. You really can't do the work for anybody else. There's always that boundary. Yet amazing things have happened in the world of Reiki. So this topic and probably many other little intersections are going to be our topic today on the Reiki Women Podcast. So who would like to begin talking about how we can make that bridge between healing ourselves and healing the world?
Shall we draw straws? You're pointing at me. I can see it.
Like, how do you come up? You do come up, down, up. But
I am happy to start. This topic, it feels, on the one hand, very simple and at the same time, very expansive and complex, like both at the same time. So I'm really curious to see where this conversation will take us. There's so many directions that I think we can go with this, but what comes up to my mind immediately is not the direction I originally thought. It's not what's at the top of my notes for today. It's, just as you were introducing this topic, Carrie, a memory from yesterday came to the surface. I have the honor of leading a quarterly group of Reiki practitioners where we discuss the intersections of the practice of Reiki and the practice of grieving and of loss, and what are the particular gifts of practicing the system of Reiki with regard to grief and loss and death, and the responsibilities that brings to those of us who actively practice. I often use the word kuleana, which is a Hawaiian word that means joyful burden, the thing that is heavy to carry and at the same time, gladdens our heart and brings us joy. And in yesterday's gathering, a very timely gathering, we had a lot of conversation about the heaviness of the world and of really painful things happening on the world stage, the current conflict in Gaza being kind of front of mind. And there's just so much grief in the room and in the conversation. And I was so grateful that we had, just serendipitously timed that particular meeting to be at this time. And so when I think about, how we leverage our Reiki practice to heal the world, right? Which can feel like a momentous task, right? Almost absurdly large to take on, right? Or to think that we could, do that as individual practitioners. I think about that experience of sitting together in this grief circle, essentially, and drawing on our Reiki practice to make more space inside of each of us and inside of the group for the grief that was present, or for the pain that is present, for the woundedness that is present, however we want to view the thing that needs healing in the world, right? Which is many, many things. And so, I think that's where it really that's where it starts for me, is that the system of Reiki creates conditions inside of ourselves where there's more room to feel what we're feeling, to experience what we're experiencing, to help us navigate that without dissociating or overwhelming ourselves or going into high anxiety, high anger, one end or the other of the spectrum of overwhelm, where we either shut down, dissociate, burn out, become apathetic, or going into the hyperdrive, the overdrive of, I have to fix all the problems of the world and it's too big, and that overloads our system. Neither one of those extremes gets us to a place where we can really affect change, and both of them harm us to spend time inside of those states of mind and states of heart. And so, as you said, Carrie, it begins with our self-practice from the inside out. And specifically, what it begins with is creating more space inside to be with what we are feeling, be with what we are seeing, so that we can actually see it. We can observe what's happening in the world and in our communities in a more unflinching way, a more courageous way, a more compassionate way, in a way that makes it harder to look away. And therefore relaxes our nervous system, because we're not feeling so constricted, and allows us to see what's right in front of us. Okay, there's this vast pain, hurt, grief, conflict, violence, brokenness, whatever it is. I can't fix all of that myself, but there's something in front of me that's mine to do. There's some next right thing that is within my capacity. That is something that I can do. And I can't necessarily see that or even take the action that it's asking me to if I'm in either one of those places of overwhelm. And so that's just what we experienced yesterday, coming into that grief circle. Most of us feeling very heavy, very exhausted, overwhelmed, angry, hopeless, confused, not knowing what to do. And being together, being in community, being in Reiki, had us leaving feeling like we could take a good look at what's the next right thing to do and what's inside of each of our capacity to do. And so, yeah, I think that's where I'd like to start. That with Reiki, we heal the world by making space for the world inside of ourselves.
Yeah, I like that. And maybe I can sort of see that, maybe look at it, just take it into a slightly different philosophical sort of area, but same idea. And it's this thing about how we see our worlds and how we experience our worlds. And I always have this idea that we each live in our own universe. It's just how we experience, because what's happening in my world and how I see the things happening in my world will be different to how you both do, even though they might be the same things that we're looking at, because, I'll have my own experiences that I bring to this. So it's almost like I have my own universe, because I'm experiencing and mirroring things in my own way. And that's unique for every single one of us. When people say the universe is telling me that, I should have muesli for breakfast, or is it granola in the US? Yes, granola for breakfast. For me, that doesn't work, because in fact, it's me. This is my universe and my experiences, and they're not all great and they're not all bad. They're just all a bunch of experiences and feelings and things that I encounter in my life. And this idea of putting something outside of ourselves doesn't work for me. It's very much about realizing that it is me, and that, okay, yes, all these things exist and I didn't necessarily put them there, but how I work with them, that is definitely about me and how I experience them. So I think I don't really see the universe telling me to have granola for breakfast. I see myself thinking that, or feeling that. And I don't need to put that out onto somebody else or some other thing. I can take responsibility for myself, for my universe and my experience in it, even though, like I said, that doesn't mean it's always going to be great. Yeah. it is just what it is. But taking that responsibility, that's sort of then where I would go with this. So healing the world, that's the world that I'm experiencing, my world. The only way that I can heal that is, once again, by taking responsibility. So going into myself and feeling what that means, what I think about it, how, what are my deeper, in my quiet contemplation, what do I find to be the meanings in this world, and what can I do for it? So if I am to heal the world, that's what I would do. And I would go inside myself. I would use the practices that I know, that I'm familiar with, that I'm comfortable with, which would be largely Reiki practices such as Joshin Kokyoho. And I would sit with that, and I would look at how I'm taking the world in, I guess. Yeah, that's probably all I can add at the moment.
Well, I think all of you just pointed out so much poetry there. And I think I'm very inspired by your words and your point of view and perspectives. I love that we pointed it back to responsibility. And I'm thinking of Reiki and thinking of myself, if you consider yourself a healer, as this kind of joyful burden, blissful, beautiful burden, but nevertheless, it gets heavy at times. That there is a blessing and a burden inside of each of our gifts, and what we have to share with the world. So, so I'm thinking of the yogic word Dharma. Dharma is your life purpose, and Dharma is ultimately your gift to the world. It's the thing that you offer to the world of your lifestyle, your life force, yourself. And in that process of offering that gift to the world, you also receive in exchange. There's that reciprocity that's happening. So you receive in your own, maybe spiritual life, your personal life, your bank account, all of those things to offer that service to the world. And so, our Dharma can be as simple as making other people food with love, and doing it joyfully, right? And some people, that is their gift. They're just amazing cooks, and that's, they put so much love in their food. And whether or not the people who receive it notice that or not, because sometimes people are fairly mindless about what we eat, we keep giving gratefully anyways, right? And then there is that reciprocity in exchange, giving back to our cooks. We kids are cooks, right? um, and So I think that's really important. And when I look at the word responsibility, the way I define it is my ability to respond. And that really speaks a lot to what Michaela was saying, is that sometimes our ability to respond is completely overwhelmed. And sometimes our little ability to respond is, different in every circumstance, right? So I'm going to pass it back to you guys, because I have a little one and some responsibility right here on my shoulders. So I have more thoughts to say about that.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that the way that the cooking metaphor, circles us back to what our sphere of influence is. And when I think about healing the world, healing others, whatever that means to each of us, the question of what is my actual sphere of influence is an important one. And of course, as Bronwen, you said, my primary sphere of influence is myself, beginning with my interior landscape, how I'm feeling, what my thought patterns are, what my beliefs are, what my values are, how those get expressed, how grounded I am, how spacious I am, how connected I am, how present I am with what is happening for me. And as we've talked about, a number of times in different contexts on this podcast, my understanding of the way that Reiki works as far as sharing with other people is that it's this rippling out from inside of ourselves, and it's the the connectedness of energy and the biology of entrainment and mirroring and connectedness that happens between living beings, right? Humans and each other, other beings, that we naturally influence each other. We naturally take on, well, we naturally have the capacity, right? It's not that it's automatically always going to happen, right? But we naturally have the capacity to be influenced by others and to influence others in terms of how we feel, what we think, what our energy is like, how hopeful we feel, how motivated we feel, how calm we feel, right? How easeful we feel, how worried we feel, etc. And so therefore my sphere of influence radiates outward from my own landscape, right? Which I must tend first, my own heartscape, my own landscape inside. And then whatever that landscape is, radiates from me in whatever shape it's in, right? If there's angry storm clouds running through my heartscape, then that's what I'm going to be radiating. If there's fear, that's what I'm going to be radiating. If there's, apathy or frustration or, any of those things, that's what I'm going to be sending out into the world as my influence. And that naturally touches the people I'm in contact with and has the opportunity to influence them, which has the opportunity to influence people that they're connected to, and so on. And so, certainly that immediate sphere of influence, the people that we're connected to most directly, is where we can have the most direct impact on healing the world. And, the example of food is just such a poignant one I think for all of us, right? Because it's such a fundamental human need, and therefore such a fundamental way of expressing care. And it's a place where we can really look to for, are we taking care of ourselves and each other, or are we not, right? Like how we tend to our food can reflect a lot of that. I was just thinking this afternoon, I want to bring a big pot of homemade soup to my daughter's work. She works in a warehouse and it's cold. And I'm going to bring them a nice big pot of soup tomorrow. I'm going to be mama for everybody, bring them some homemade soup. It's an automatic way of wanting to share love and care with other people. And then, the way that immediate sphere of influence continues to travel is interesting, right? It's complex. It can travel through social media, right? We are creating a sphere of influence by talking on the internet, right, about things. And to the degree that anybody pays attention to what we're saying, there's some potential for influence there, both in terms of the words that we say and the energy that we're projecting as we gather in this way and talk about these things. The things that might inspire others to do, right? The actions that might inspire others to take, the encouragement for people to take up their own Reiki practice and share it in their own spheres of influence. So, the points of connection in the tangible world, right? The internet, our relationships, the pot of soup that we deliver, all of these things, they get mirrored in the energetic, and interconnection is such an important central philosophical framework for the system of Reiki, that, opens our mind to the possibility. I mean, this can be a really challenging possibility because we're very socialized to think of ourselves as isolated beings, but it opens up the possibility of influence across, no barrier, right? Influence between us and people on the other side of the world, people in the past, people in the future, the world itself, right? The earth, the animals, the beings of the world. It opens this possibility that our sphere of influence might actually be infinite, right? But that it takes concentration, it takes focus in order for that to be in our consciousness, right? And to be something we can have control over. The other central concept that I think is really at play here is non-duality, because so often the feeling of brokenness, of conflict, the things that cause like large scale dis-ease in the world, particularly when we're looking at conflicts, right? Global conflicts, is duality, right? Is the sense that there's me and you, there's us and them, there's winners and losers, there's good people, bad people, there's the right side, the wrong side. you name it, like we're going to divide ourselves, we're going to categorize ourselves, right? And it's always going to fall into me and them, right? And me is good and them is bad, is generally how our mind reconciles all of the different things that we need to deal with. And so that has so many entailments in terms of the hurt that happens in the world. And so, again, part of this practice is softening the edges of that duality, right? Softening the edge of this is me and it's mine versus them and that's theirs, and it sounds like a paradox, right? Because Bronwen, you were saying all I can influence is myself, right? I have to go into myself. And then there's, oh, but I'm connected to everything, right? The thing is, both are true, right? It's not actually a dualistic paradox. It's actually true. Like where I can most readily focus my attention, that's not always true, because there's a lot of things that can cause us to have a really hard time focusing our attention in here. But let's just say my original sphere of influence is me, is my own mind, my own heart. And at the same time, there's this possibility that I'm connected to everybody, and therefore my sphere of influence is infinite. So those are, some of the other thoughts that are swirling around this idea.
So though I was saying it's about me, what I'm saying is that this world that I live in is me.
Yeah.
So, there actually is no boundary between me and you and the computer and the nature. And so this is my world, this is me, and so whatever's going on in that world is within my sphere of influence, for sure. That's how I see it anyway. But I was thinking of recently I just did that distance healing class, and in it I talked about Michaela, you just spoke about that infiniteness, yeah? And there is a practice, a Buddhist practice, which a Japanese Buddhist practice, which actually translates as circle of awareness. And it is comparative to distance healing. And the idea that we exist in a circle, so that never ending, no time, it's all just there, just moving, shifting, happening, and bringing our awareness into that. And for me, that's a really powerful imagery. In my mind, I always have that Zen circle, thinking of that Zen circle, which is very active and lots happening in it, but it's all happening at the same time. And that's sort of how I experience, I imagine that I experience my world to a large degree. And that does live in a space without duality. And that idea of softening that duality is really important, as you said. If we can imagine ourselves living in this active space that is without boundaries, and everything that exists is here right now, then this is obviously what the precepts are bringing us into as well. Then in that space, we really, if we have that idea, then we really can just bring into that our whole selves present, aware, loving, here for each other. And it does help us to be to release we don't want in that circle of life, we don't want anger and worry and all those things, right? Or fear. So we really want to release that, and to be in this active space of compassion. And yes, of course, everyone we meet, if someone's really sad, then, we feel that sadness. We can't but help feel that sadness, or someone's really excited, then it's exciting to be with that. So, we're always influencing each other. And I don't know. That's sort of how I feel about it. I'm not doing very good endings today, but anyway, I'm stopping. Next.
I love all of this. This is such a wonderful conversation. But I've been thinking a lot about how, we can impact somebody a little bit, and we can impact, one person a lot. So our role as parents, we're impacting that particular person an incredible degree. Depending on our degrees of separation, we might impact other people's lives by something positive that we did or something we put out there into our communities or our circles, as we've been talking about. And that might impact somebody in a way that we don't even know. I remember a while back, I got just a random message on through social media from somebody who did a Reiki session with me, one Reiki session with me many years ago, and it changed her life. And she ultimately studied Reiki with somebody else. I had no idea, right? This transaction I had with this person was so far gone in my mind, but she ultimately became a Reiki practitioner herself. She credited Reiki with helping her so much to heal. And so we don't know that ripple effect of, our practice and ourself in the world, choosing to be maybe a bigger part of that shift. That I think at the heart of all healers, there's that desire that we want to help the world heal. And maybe at the heart of everybody, of humanity, there's that heart inside of us. And we might go through it with different ways and different methods, or we might be so broken down by the pain in the world that we really can't step into that light. And so, we can't change anybody else or make them do anything that they don't want to do or become and we should never try to become something that we don't want to become. I've had to hit that edge a lot of times as a Reiki practitioner, to remind myself, like, I don't have to be anyone I don't want to be. And that's that personal responsibility. But when we can step into our light and offer and share healing with our communities and the world, we can do things like this example that I shared of just making an impact, a big impact, and seemingly small in my world, into somebody else's life and reality. And we can also, after maybe we've had these kind of transformative experiences that brought us in alignment on our path, that we can share the work with each other. So we can't do the work for anybody else, but we can share opportunities like you were talking about, Michaela, to come together in a circle of grief and to do some of that work of grieving together in community. And by doing so, it lightens the burden of a heavy heart. As one of the things I just love, I heard along the way as a yoga teacher, is that, I get a chance to impact the quality of somebody's day by just holding space with the yoga class, by my words, by the work that I put together to make a yoga class, accessible for my students and, wonderful, hopefully, for my students. And I get to impact their day. And same with the practice of Reiki. I really think that Reiki can transform people's lives, for the better. And so that is a big responsibility. I think as you start to lean in towards becoming a spiritual teacher or practitioner, is that impact that you can have on somebody's life can be quite profound. And so it does require us to be doing the work ourselves. Like Gandhi, he said, we must be the change we wish to see in the world. And so if we just point our fingers and project outwards to other people to do that work and are not doing it ourselves, we'll come up against probably many obstacles in that, because we won't be aware of how hard it is or how much work it really takes, or confronted with the task of forgiving something that's unforgivable. We have to work through that as healers, and and even if we don't consider ourselves as healers, we have to support other people and ourselves to do that task. And it's deep, soulful work, and it's so worth it, because the gift of all of that is we get to, notice the impact of kindness that that we have on our world around us. So an example of this, I was like just in a big old rush, as I always am. I was at the grocery store, I was in a big old rush, and I just needed to get out of this parking lot. I was probably overstimulated. Somebody next to me was still loading up their groceries, and I didn't know it, but she had put a bag of her groceries basically behind my tire, and I started going back, and I ran over a bunch of her groceries, and oh, and I felt so bad. I felt so bad for this woman, and she could have gone crazy on me because that was a pretty crappy thing to do, or I mean, just unintentional, of course, but she was actually really kind about it. And I still, to this day, I'm like, if I could remember her face and see her again, I would try to make up for it. But she was actually just like, it's kind of my fault too. It's okay. And let me keep going on my busy, hurried, frenetic way. And, it's like she could have impacted me with this negativity, because that was, obviously I caused her harm unintentionally, but I caused her harm, and she could have just gone crazy on me, and we would have both been very impacted probably by that encounter and that experience together. But because she chose to do it kindly, I mean, we were both still impacted by that encounter together, but it was ultimately one of kindness, respect, forgiveness, all of those things, understanding. And I think that that's a really beautiful way of being in relationship to people. And I think a lot of harm, a lot of pain comes from when we're acting with each other based on, well, you did this to me, so I'm going to do this to you, and that kind of bickering can really break apart relationships, especially like marriages and partnerships. And it's easy to relate to each other sometimes that way. So practices like Reiki can help us, soften that anger, resentment that we might have towards others, no matter how justified it feels in the moment, and so that we can kind of restore that humanity between us, a kindness, a compassion, ability to see each other for who we really are, even when we might not act up according to how we want to act. So just some thoughts to think about. That's me passing the torch to somebody else, unless you guys don't have anything else to say, because I'd be happy to wrap things up as well. So maybe any closing thoughts? We're kind of at time.
Yeah, I think I'm just sitting with the importance of living with this question, right? Not that we have all of the answers, right? And not that I think there's a lot of ways to deal with this question. And so for those listening and for us in this conversation, just in closing, I really want to encourage us to live into this question and to not rush to find answers to it, not rush to find exactly the right thing to do, but to just let it be alive with us, right? What does it mean to influence the world in a positive way? We might call that healing the world. There's a lot of ways that we could name it, right? But what does it mean? What does it take from us? What does it require from us? What does it invite us to? Where are we strong in our capacity for it already? Where are we challenged? What are the parts of ourselves that resists this idea of a widening and potentially infinite sphere of influence? That's work that we could spend the rest of our life doing, right? Finding the places inside of ourselves that resists influencing the world in positive ways. And the parts of ourselves that are absolutely ready and willing and able and at full capacity to bring our goodness out into the world, and how can we support those parts of ourselves. So I think that's where I land, is just the importance of living with this question and not rushing to answer it for ourselves.
Yeah, sure. And I guess so, just listening to that, thinking about when we're healing ourselves or healing our world, that's not necessarily, and I think you might have said that, Carrie, it's not necessarily the job of a Reiki practitioner. I think it is what everyone is doing. And I think that's really a beautiful thought, that we're all doing the best that we can. Yeah. And we all want love. We all want to have a reciprocal love with the world, even though sometimes it's hard for us to feel that or see that. But ideally, we know that would be this beautiful place. That's the thing, like with kids, Carrie, I see your young daughter and that, and, their kids are told that, the world is this beautiful place and loving, and we talk to the trees and the animals, and yet then there's a cutoff point as we grow up and we're told, well, actually, no. That's not how it is, right? And that, I wish that cutoff point didn't exist, and I wish we could continue experiencing that idea of love and care for the world without it being something that only children can be allowed to experience. I think we should all be able to experience that and bring that into our world and be together. But that's just us. And then as Reiki practitioners, it's a different thing again. And I have this sort of rule for myself that, in moments when I feel like, oh, I don't know if I can do this anymore, or, putting so much energy and time and effort into it, and, who am I really helping? What am I really helping? And you have all those thoughts of self-doubt and, trying to motivate yourself to keep going as a practitioner. For me, if I can, I don't know, maybe this is ego-based, but if I can think of one person that I can help, and I see that I can help one person, then I think that is a job worth doing. So, yeah, those are my thoughts.
Absolutely.
Shine our little lights here.
Yes.
I love that. And I love that quote that is like, by lighting somebody else's candle, like our candle, it doesn't go out, that by lighting out other people up, we don't diminish our own lights.
Yeah.
And I totally have felt those moments of overwhelm and self-doubt. And I think also incredibly important is to take time to really express gratitude to yourself and acknowledge yourself for your efforts and the things that you've given that maybe you haven't seen it return back to you in the exact way you want it to be returned. So important. And one more little thing I can say about this is why I decided to donate $1 for every Reiki session I provide to the World Wildlife Fund. Is something that I'm just something small, manageable that I can do, that I think helps me make a difference in an area of the world that matters to me, that I think matters to everybody. And so that's why I inspire other people to make that pledge too, is either join with me and donate $1 to the World Wildlife Fund for every Reiki session that you provide, or find an organization that you feel really inspired by and give what you can when you can. It makes such a big difference for those organizations that are doing such good things for the world as well. So, to all of our lovely listeners, I hope this episode was really inspiring for you and gets you shining your lights and appreciating yourself for all that you do and all that you offer to the world, knowing that spark of Reiki can be our source of so much love, strength, and inspiration, healing for the world. So want to wish you all a fabulous week, and we can't wait to continue these conversations on another episode. Have a blessed day, friends, and make sure to like, share, comment, do all the things for this episode that you feel inspired to do to keep getting the word out, to keep spreading the ripple of positivity that we're trying to create here at the Reiki Women Podcast. So blessings all.
Bye all.
Bye.